Right, Letitia.
Thank you,
And we've got the conflict
Chair.
of interest of Councillor Walker and the Mayor, so I'll leave the room for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just introduce Marion Webb, Manager Portfolio Strategy at Panuku, and Corey Barkle from Council Legal Services. The report in front of you today is the follow-up report from one that was before this committee 2 months ago regarding the proposed reserve revocation and disposal of part of 770R Great South Road. Now, the committee decided at that time for the final decision regarding the reserve revocation to come back to this committee following the close of the public consultation. I can confirm that the public consultation regarding the reserve revocation has been undertaken. It is now closed. No objections were received. Following the decision of this committee, we will then be able to proceed with the next steps of the reserve revocation, which is going to the Department of Conservation. Happy to take any questions, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Mr. Chair, look, I'm sorry late this morning because I would have liked to have been there for the presentation from the Second Nature Charitable Trust. Mr. Chair, this piece of land should never have been reserved land in the first place, actually, and whilst I'm not happy with what comes after that, that's a whole different matter. You have to accept that the item in relation to this is about a revocation, which is a technical matter. And so I'm actually going to move this recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Have a seconder? Councillor Kalapana?
We're doing questions?
Yep, still in question, but that's okay.
I have no questions. Right.
We can mix it up. Do you have a question, Councillor Simpson?
I do, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask you, in your executive summary on item 5, what are the appropriate delegations for the land sale, i.e. who gets input into that?
Through you, Chair, the delegation sits with the Panuku Development Auckland Board, and the board will approve any recommendation in terms of the sale for Panuku staff. So in terms of input, it is officer input to the Panuku Development Auckland Board.
Is there any input from the local board or anybody else?
No.
Right. My second question is, I kind of get why we're doing this, and the point that I made in the public forum asking the trust was that we're doing this so that they can do the hotel, so potentially they can be self-funding. Correct? Am I on the right page? So I suppose, is Panuku going to sell to Second Nature, and then is Second Nature going to sell to Safari, or are you going to sell directly to Safari? How does that work? Is that able to be discussed now? Because it's all part of the same discussion from my...
Through the Chair, Second Nature has entered into a sale and purchase agreement, development agreement with Safari Group, one of its group entities, and Council will be selling to Second Nature, and it'll pass through within the same transaction through to the Safari Group entity.
Right.
So technically we are selling to Second Nature and Second Nature is selling on.
Right. Is there any way to put in here somehow? Because again, the flowchart, I mean, I'm not disputing the flowchart, but the intent from my perspective is to, if we do this, they have the hotel, then they become self-funding. Is there any way to somehow build that self-funding aspect into the reason that we're doing this in the first place?
Well, this report is only about the revocation. Of the
But this is the
reserves.
only input that we have.
Well, we've had input and we have already moved resolutions in our March meeting, pretty well covering everything. And this was just to go through the last bit of transparency.
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to do, you can't.
Well, I'm just, you know, that's the purpose. I mean, I was very pleased to hear that the trust is willing, that's what they want to do it for. So the reason we're reversing the reserve status is that so that they can become self-funding, and I'm just wondering why we can't add that. That's a positive message. Why we can't add that to the resolution?
Recommitting the March items.
So remember to revoke reserve status
reason.
and it's
Yeah.
merely so they can then move it on. It's as simple as that.
So that they can move it on, so that they can be self-funding. Isn't
And
it a
that's
bit of
what
flow
this
chart?
report's about. Well, that's one of the objectives of the trust, there's no question about that, but this is only to revoke the reserve status.
Yep.
I'm sure we will get some further reports back in time by the Second Nature Trust as to their progress, because we all have a deep interest in it. So.
Yeah, I just don't understand why you're not trying to be positive and say the reason we're doing this is so that they can be self-funding.
We are being positive. This has been a very positive meeting, and we've
There's
got a
no-
mover and a seconder, and it's all moving on
question,
nicely.
very good question.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Just, can you just refresh my memory, or our memories? The intention was, and the notification says that it's, the intention is to dispose for a purpose, and the purpose is hotel and service departments. Did we have service departments confirmed when we last discussed this, or was it just a hotel?
Through the chair, yes.
It was, okay. Thank you. I'm aware that if that's our intention, we would be wanting to follow through on that intention in the future negotiations, correct?
Correct.
Is Panuku aware that there is a large parcel of land of 8,000 metres alongside this parcel that has been marketed for hotel as well?
Through you, Chair, yes, we are aware of that.
So in your negotiations, you would be keeping an eye on what might be unfolding on that site as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Walker, Wayne Walker.
Sure, just got a couple of questions. First off, just around the disposal. Given that it's a reserve, do we have to provide any substitute area as reserve because we're selling this effectively through the Reserves Act?
Through the Chair, the Reserves Act 1977 specifies that the proceeds of sale from any reserve go into Council's reserves accounts for the maintenance of existing reserves or the acquisition of future reserves. Now, on top of the mandate to do that that's set out in the Reserves Act, there's also the resolution from last year regarding Transform Manukau, that the funds in the Manukau area be ring-fenced within there. So on that basis, the proceeds of sale from this that Council receives will be ring-fenced in the Manukau area towards reserves in that area.
Okay, so that's all right. And the other question I've got just goes to value, and that's value to Panuku as the seller. So does the use that the land is going to be put around the hotels and the apartments factor into the price that we get for it?
Through the Chair, yes it does. This land will be based on the value of the land once the reserve status has been lifted, not the current value of the land while it's currently subject to the Reserves Act.
And does it take into account what's proposed to be put on it? That's the hotel and the apartments.
Through the Chair, yes.
Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just a question of semantics, I think, probably, but just point number 6, am I right in assuming that notification in the paper, that constitutes public consultation then, in terms of the briefs under which you operate?
Through the Chair, yes it does, and that's also in accordance with the requirements of the Department of Conservation as set out in the Reserves Act. Adjoining landowners are also contacted as well, but in this instance, the Second Nature Charitable Trust is the adjoining landowner, so consultation wasn't undertaken with them.
Are they supportive?
Member Hernati.
Who revokes reserve status?
Through the Chair, the Minister of Conservation, ultimately.
Does that have to be by an act of Parliament or just a Gazette notice?
Gazette notice.
It's not actually an act of Parliament. The delegation or the authority sits with the Minister.
Lies with the Minister.
Sorry?
Lies with the Minister.
Lies with the Minister, and it's recorded by way of gazetting.
Cool.
All right. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr Chair. My question's just probably wanting to gain some confidence around the question that was raised by Councillor Sharon Stewart earlier that got answered by the Trust. I don't fully understand the background of it, but I'm hoping that perhaps Panuku understood the gist of that question and that we feel very comfortable from a legal perspective.
Councillor Sayers, I'm just going to have to overrule you on that one. So this is about the revocation of the reserve status. Simple as that. But offline, you can get further explanation on that.
All right.
We'll make sure you do. Right, there are no more speakers. We have a mover and we have a seconder, so I'll put the resolution. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Right, excellent. Thank you, Letitia. Thank you, team.
Thank you, Mr Chair, councillors.
Car park strategy. We have Richard and Don and John. Auckland Transport.
Morning. First of all, apologies, Dave Warburton couldn't be here today, and neither could Greg Edmonds, who heads the property section, and Andrew Allen, who looks after parkings, on compassionate leave at the moment, so you've got me, I'm sorry.
Right.
With me I have John Strawbridge, who looks after parking in Auckland Transport, and Don Munro, who looks after strategic asset management.
So just be aware that we've put up another resolution just up there to cover Browns Bay and Baxter Street, Warkworth, so that will be follow-up resolution to effectively what is a report today. So is there anything?
I think maybe just a couple of introductory comments. I mean, the genesis of this was a request to look at our whole land holdings to see what could possibly be sold, if you like, or as surplus to requirements. Around the same time, 2015, we'd completed our parking strategy, which put a rationale around when we charge for parking and when it should be free, and a whole lot of other factors, park and rides and so forth. So the criteria in which we looked at our land holdings were around, they were based off the parking strategy, and they looked at factors like who gets the benefit from this, is there a shortage of parking in the area, how does it fit with public transport, park and rides and the lot. So this was one of 94 properties now that have been identified as not required for a transport purpose. The process for those is to go into council and then Panuku to look at whether there are alternative uses within the council, and then potentially to run through the disposal process with the local community. So far so good there. I think where this process has come apart, and I would say that with the other 94 properties there's potential for this current Browns Bay set of issues to be repeated again and again, I think in reality Auckland Transport should have fronted the local board on this and explained why we'd got to where we did. Unfortunately there was a bit of a hiccup in the process really, where the formal responsibility for consulting with the community rests with Panuku, but I think it's much more sensible to have us in the room at the same time, really.
So given that sort of little bit of tension there between AT and Panuku, do you feel as though you're on the same page better?
I think it'd be useful to have guidance from the committee, but I don't think, generally we work very well together and so forth. This was the start of a process that's going to involve a lot of properties around Auckland, so I think some clarity from the council that that's the expectation would be useful. Really.
Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just noticing the additional clause there to the resolution, including Baxter Street car park. I just want to gain clarification. It's saying to be measured against the policy 20, is it, of the Auckland Transport Parking Strategy? 2D, is it? Oh, thank you. And where the resolution that we passed, Mr Chair, was to try and identify within a 3-month period if we could find an alternative parking area with the same number of car parks or more. Does this does this, I just would rather not see that overwritten in any way, if it's complementary or not.
They'll be done together, because it's been 2 months since we passed that resolution, and there was a 3-month window, so so this will be part of that.
Right.
Could I just clarify, and there's kind of 2 answers to this question. The Baxter Street Walkwith car park isn't an AT car park, it's an Auckland Council car park. Having said that, the whole point about this is that we all need to be working as one on this. So Auckland Transport's put, for safety reasons and for other common sense reasons, we've spent money on this car park ourselves. So let's not get into arguments about who owns it, but I would just say this isn't one of ours.
Just a supplementary there, Mr Chair, would be...
Sorry, Don, did you want to say something?
Oh no, just to confirm that, you know, we operate that for the council, and we've maintained it, and but ultimately, you know, we're challenged with the aspect of spending capital on an asset that's not ours.
Yep. Great. Sorry, Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Just if we could get perhaps a copy of that policy 2D. Just
It's on page 50.
is it on?
Page 15 of, item 15 of attachment A to your report outlines the criteria.
There's a link. There's a link in.
And there's a link to the parking strategy in the.
Is there? Okay.
Oh, he's got a hard copy, he hasn't got the
Yeah.
link.
Okay. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
it'll
you.
be on his computer anyway.
Councillor Simpson.
No, I didn't have a question.
No, Councillor Watson.
No, thanks. I take the point here that you've just raised about AT being asked not to engage with local communities, and you feeling it subsequently, you know, that's maybe not such a great idea. In light of the fact that the consultation, such as it is, we heard from the last item, can just amount to notification in the Herald, you know, the back page of the Herald is somewhere. In instances of car parks which have a wider community use, I just wonder how satisfactory that is then as a form of consultation in the wider field, given that, as you're finding out, that car parks can attract a bit of emotion and concern from the community.
We always expected it would, and I don't think back page of the Herald is how local boards should find out about anything that we're up to, really. It's really a question about when we engage. So I can fully understand that nobody wanted us talking to the local boards about this or any of the other potential sites until the council had undertaken its own assessment of whether or not there are alternative uses. So there's a sensible process to be followed through, really, but it needs to remain sensible.
Mr Chair, I've got a few specific comments relating to the Anzac car park in Browns Bay. Do you want to finish with the questions first, or are you happy to incorporate
No,
comments?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just interested in your response to this, my commentary anyway, as it goes to the rationale for decision here. On the one hand, and this seems to be largely a rehash of this study or investigation, whatever it was, back in 2014-15 that was done here. I just would make the point that quite a bit has changed since those 2 years, not least of which is the unitary plan. But in this particular area, we have increasing intensification. We have a number of resource consents granted for apartment buildings. So a number of developments that's putting more people into Browns Bay. That would be the first point that I would make. Back in 2014-15, you do say in the report that the utilisation and occupancy of the facility was high. However, that was kind of dismissed in the same sentence, saying that, you know, you felt that a number of the people using it were going to this new world. In the new world only opened up midway through 2015. It wasn't open. That was a largely dormant building in 2014. I just wonder how you make that assessment over the period of a week, given that this car park is just a short stroll away from the main road and a slightly further away from the beach, and a beachfront that is always chock-a-block as far as public access goes. So I'm just trying to tease out, Mr Chair, just really the basis on which that comment is made given that Browns, for instance, were people down there on the weekend when Browns Bay is absolutely heaving, and the use there is not so much the New World, it's going to the shops on the main road and the beach.
Just, I mean, John or Don might want to comment, but certainly in the case of Browns Bay, the picture in front of you isn't the full picture of parking in Browns Bay, of course. There's reserve parking down by the beach that the council manages, which again is part of the need to keep all of this joined up. There's also quite a lot of private parking down there as well in the back, in the shops here between the fish and chip shop and the French cafe and the vegetable shop. So you're dead right. The only time that Browns Bay is really short of parking is on hot summer's days and the weekends when the beaches are packed. It's occasional. I understand the local board's point of view, but that's the debate exactly that we need to have.
So just by way of conclusion then, Mr Chair, and I understand the position Auckland Transport have been put in here, and that's pretty clear from the introductory comments, but in a situation post-unitary plan, Mr Chair, I'm just wondering how valid that original dictate from the Mayor actually is now, given that it's 2 years on, the unitary plan's in, we have a lot more people getting crammed into these areas, we have a lot more elderly people who are far less mobile, and we're proposing to sell off all across Auckland a number of the car parks that I suggest that these people often rely on. I think there's an illogic there that is going to become increasingly apparent, and with all due respect, I think the local boards are picking up on that more so than the governing body, I think.
Back off.
Perhaps I can
Yes, Don. Yeah.
just talk to that a little bit. The Auckland Transport strategy with parking is that its primary focus is on servicing the short-term parking, which is around ensuring the economic viability of the centre. With regard to the unitary plan changes that have come about for residential, the expectation is the market will provide what the market needs for residential parking. There's not an obligation on the council to step in to provide, or Auckland Transport to step in to provide for that. So if parking is required for residential, the expectation is that the market will provide for it. And that was the consideration in the unitary plan deliberations.
Yep.
I'm happy to move the receipt of the report of the strategy, Mr Chairman.
Sorry?
If you to approve the recommendations.
Just the A.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I had to call from you, Mr Chairman, I think.
Yep, no, but I'm asking for a seconder because it has been asked. Councillor Walker will second.
No, not this council.
John Walker, Councillor John Walker. Okay.
They're all the same.
Yeah. Just a clarification on
Walker, you
para
said
12. Para 12, you point out that the car park is primarily servicing customers and staff of the adjacent New World supermarket. I suppose the first question is, I presume that you can back that up. It's research-based, so it's reliable information. But secondly, if that is correct, has there been any interest shown by New World in purchasing the car park for the use of its own staff and customers?
Through the Chair and Your Worship, I've got updated statistics, including occupancy right through that area in the whole of Browns Bay, which I'll make available to the committee. I only received these this morning as of November 16, so it's far more current. And in terms of the second part of your question, that would be a matter that only Panuku would be able to answer for us today, whether New World. There we go.
I've just had it whispered in my ear that the answer was yes.
Okay, so let's just clarify that point, that New World has indicated an interest in buying the car park. So the question before the council is not whether it's still used for car parking, but whether we own it to provide free car parking to New World, its staff and its customers. I think that sheds a different light on what our discussion has been.
And through the Chair, absolutely, and through that process, if we do retain it, we pay all the OPEX.
Yeah.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Just on the reds up there, I have a couple of questions. Richard and John and Don, thank you. Paragraph 16, you stand by AT's recommendation is to divest. And so my key question here is, in arriving at that decision to support divestment, I would assume that you've assessed it against the criteria in your own strategy, which is 2D. You've done that.
Yes, correct.
So I was
Mr.
only
Chair,
moving A.
if that is done, I do not see the point of putting up the B. We are at risk of going around in circles here.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, I was moving A because I wasn't sure whether B was some sort of amendment or your own addition.
I mean, my own view on this, and I think I speak for Auckland Transport, is that it's all very well for us to assess it against a set of criteria, but I do think the community has to have a say before it's simply put on the block, really.
I agree.
Yes. So if that's the case, if that's the Chief Financial Officer's recommendation, I don't think it's a question of redoing 2D. But mind you, 2D, Mr. Chair, is for 2 sites.
Yeah.
So we just need to take that into account. But maybe the resolution or the motion needs to reflect the Chief Financial Officer's expressed view that there needs to be community engagement, not the redoing of 2D on the part of Auckland Transport.
Can I just clarify, we've done it for Browns Bay. I'm not sure we've done the 2D assessment for the Baxter Street Walkwith.
Okay, can we get these motions right then?
Yep, yep, we've got several more people there, so in the meantime, Councillor Wayne Walker.
Well, who's writing the resolution?
So,
At the moment, we have a mover and a seconder for A only, so we will look at what we're going to do with B and if we need another C.
so just got a few questions. What sort of facilities do we have in the Browns Bay area to cater for the sort of car-based and cycle-based services that we see in many overseas cities around car-sharing schemes, cities operating car hire, bicycle hire, particularly now around e-bikes, e-cars and so on. So what locations do we have in Browns Bay for that into the future?
There's nothing at the moment, although the redevelopment of the promenade area is very cycle-centric. In terms of a shared car service, that's a commercially driven operation that would need someone the likes of City Hop to come forward and request space there via our Traffic Control Committee to resolve a car park for that.
Okay, so coming back to my question, and that's around how many spaces we would forecast out for those sorts of schemes that operate increasingly successfully in other cities and make a significant contribution to freeing up road space and the like. And I note that other cities provide public spaces for those enterprises, which are often done in partnership with the city because they perform a public good.
Yep, so that's exactly what we do in terms of the current relationships we have with these businesses. In terms of Browns Bay, we've had no approaches yet for that sort of service.
I don't think it's in the local board strategy at this stage, is it really? And there's no plan to put park and rides there. I think you're talking to us on Friday about the quarterly report, and you'll see in there that we are about to launch ride sharing. We've done a soft launch of ride sharing over the last while. But
so I guess, going back to my question, I mean, is there any planning, is there any forecasting, is there any requirement for spaces? If there hasn't been any planning done for this kind of facility in this area, just say so.
So what John has said is that we're reliant on a commercial partner to approach us to do that, and until such time as we have an approach, we haven't done any planning to make an allowance for this sort of thing. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility for us to reallocate spaces to such an operation.
Sure.
I think the answer is no.
Okay, and knows all I'm after,
Yep.
and that's what I understand. When I look at existing and future populations and employment growth in the catchment, I'm assuming that those existing and future populations take into account the intensification in the unity plan
Yes,
Okay, and I'm assuming that you're also taking into account what we actually see happening in the marketplace, which is that apartments and so on aren't providing for adequate parking because it costs them a lot of money. That's what the marketplace does. The developers don't want to put in parking, and it would appear are increasingly reliant on street parking and the like. Are you taking that into account in Browns Bay in terms of your projections?
so that's an emerging feature, but the intention of the unitary plan regulations was that it allowed the market to determine the parking requirement, and the market is in the best place to determine what apartments will sell with or without car parking.
Sure.
And then if there is an overspill effect, we will manage that through the tools that we have in terms of parking enforcement and the likes on the street.
And just on the unitary plan, my understanding is that this particular part of the unitary plan is under challenge, substantial challenge. Is that the case?
It is under appeal on the basis of the exclusion of parking minimums for retail facilities.
Sure. Okay. That's probably enough for me at this point, and I'll reserve my right to speak later. Chair.
Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's a bit of, I don't know why that's happening. It's more of a comment, but it's at either a yes or a no, I guess. But I think what's not included in this item is the fact that during the time between the study and now, actually below that blue box is all a new car park outside in front of the New World. So this was done before that large car park below the blue was actually in place. So that's been in place for the New World, and my partner's family lived just up the road, and I know that that other car park I just assumed was part of the New World car park too. I didn't really, but yeah. So just to let the other councillors know that that whole car park below it is a brand new car park with a whole lot more spaces across the road from a whole nother supermarket with a whole another few hundred car parks as well.
And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Councillor Lee. Councillor Lee, Mike Lee. Yep.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, this is the second time we have discussed this car park, and it looks like we're going to be discussing it for a third time. In their worst moments, the honourable architects of the Super City did not envisage, I am sure, that the governing body of the Auckland Council and senior executives of at least one CCO and another, probably less senior members of another, sitting around discussing the disposal of one car park in Browns Bay. That is properly the business of a local board. I think if people realise how much money was being wasted on this, I think they'd be truly appalled. This is not leadership, and this is not acting as a super city.
We actually agree.
Councillor Sayers.
Here, here.
Probably just picking up on Councillor Lee's point there, if just noting mooting of C up there, Mr. Chair, if that does go forward, I think the Rodney Local Board should be included in the consultations around Baxter Street if we're going to do it with the hibiscus around Anzac Avenue.
Councillor Wayne Walker again.
Sure. So I'd like to speak to the motion. I'm opposed to the sale of the car park at Browns Bay at this time. I think it's a very short-term response, and I can only say from what I see happening in my ward, there is an unmitigated disaster rolling out around parking. I'll repeat that, an unmitigated disaster around parking. If you look at areas of intensification, and I'm certainly familiar with what's happening in Albany, we've got massive apartment development, nowhere near enough off-street parking in those apartments, nowhere near enough parking for businesses, so businesses are closing. they are shutting facilities. The Ministry of Justice in Albany, which had a service centre for people in the Albany area, had to close that facility because people couldn't find a location to park. There is presently a disjunct, a mismatch between parking and public transport availability. The public transport availability as an alternative simply is not there. I'll repeat that. It is not there. So we're taking short-term responses when the alternatives are not in place. I would suggest that if a study was done in Browns Bay and you look at the massive intensification that's happening there, which I'm well familiar with, and the parking that those people in those apartments and their visitors are going to require, you'll find that we're just not going to cut it unless this aspect of the unitary plan is rolled back, because it simply doesn't work. If you look at the catchment of Browns Bay, you've got hills all around, and people drive down to Browns Bay to do their shopping. It's pretty difficult for them to cycle up and walk up from Browns Bay, I can tell you.
It's dangerous.
And there aren't any local shuttle buses or anything like that, particularly for older people, and there are a lot of older people in the catchment of Browns Bay. So I'm afraid that this sort of sale just doesn't add up. It impacts on the lifeblood of businesses, and I'm not talking about the big New Worlds and the like that have their own car parks, but the other businesses, and there are lots of them in that area. And then the other thing that you have in Browns Bay, and I don't mean to go on, is it's a wonderful beach. So lots of people, lots of families want to go to the beach, and they occupy all of the beachfront area and further back. So I'm opposed to this for very good reason, and I would suggest that the local board is on side. They're opposed to this, and this is going to come back and haunt us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Look, support the motions as they've been modified, and thanks, Chair, for tidying those up. And also, I want to reiterate, following up on my question, the Chief Financial Officer said that AT had undertaken Policy 2D, which is the assessment for divestment. And while we hear a lot of anecdotal, it's not the job of AT to just rely on anecdotal. They've undertaken a proper assessment against 9 criteria, and one of those criteria is taking into account the unitary plan provisions, etc., area plans, all of that. So they have put it through those 9 lenses, and they still come up with the answer. I think we have to rely upon that thorough process having been undertaken. We can't keep asking for more of this. Otherwise it does go round in circles, and we do consume a lot of time here, as Councillor Lee is pointing out. The reason it is here, it's not because it's a car park, it's because it's a divestment, and that divestment has to come through this committee. That's the job of this committee. Whether it be a small parcel or a large parcel, it still has to be socialised through this committee and committed to by this committee. So that is why it is here. But I would hope that we do not keep running around in circles on this one. It should have been resolved a little bit more simply, but I am entirely satisfied that the 9 criteria under 2D have been satisfied for the Anzac site, not referring to the Walkworth site.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. Councillor Hoss.
Thank you. I find myself in total agreement with Councillor Lee. I'm kind of amazed that we could spend so much time on this. So I've got a question and a comment. My question is, if we're going to move forward, why are we going back to consult with the local boards? It's completely beyond me. I think we need to be going back to the local boards and saying we're either going to accept the step change in the city with regard to public transport and development of a compact city, or you're going to hold us back. I don't think it's consultation with the local board. I think it's a serious discussion around get a grip and move on. The Henderson Massey local board have completely understood what's required of the new city, and I take my hat off to them. These boards are just not prepared to engage in the discussion, and I'm a little bit confused Mr Chair, Councillor Wayne Walker has been our champion for carbon reduction, for sustainability, climate change mitigation, all of those issues, and is now advocating for the retention of at-grade car parking. If we're not prepared to make that step change and start
Can I
investing...
respond, Mr Chair?
No,
At the
I
appropriate
don't,
time?
a point of order isn't when you disagree with someone. A point of order, I have the right to say what I've said. I'm simply stating the fact. The issue at hand is how do we fund the requirements for investment in public transport infrastructure and in infrastructure that's going to serve a compact city. And unless we're able to engage in these disposals, we're not going to move forward. So my question is, Mr Chair, why are we going round the loop again? Is that what those recommendations are suggesting to us? Because to what end? I think we're going to come to the same conclusion. And although I'm probably a bit frustrated with those local boards, I don't believe in leading them down a garden path on a useless piece of consultation where we're going to come up with the same conclusion. So I'll support A, and I would have been quite happy for us just to move that we move on. I don't think we should be engaging in empty conversations when we've got no intention of changing our mind.
Did you want to comment further? No?
I'm not sure really. I think there's two approaches here. You do a desk-based exercise and do the analysis and come up with an answer and then move along with it, or you have some local democracy where the local board gets a chance to have their view on whatever the desktop exercise is. And I mean, those two views are well expressed here today, and we're looking for some clarity as to which of those should be done. I think the current process around the Browns Bay site was unsatisfactory. I think the Browns Bay folk felt disempowered by not having the opportunity to have their say, and I understand that, and I do think Auckland Transport should have been there to front that discussion really and explain exactly why we got to the conclusion we did. But the ultimate call on this comes from you guys.
Yep. Councillor Kirby, you're the mover. Are you still only wanting to move A? And
that's what I wanted to discuss. I mean, for me, yes. Normally we go to the local boards first, but these haven't been to the local board at all.
No, and again, the rationale was
that... So that's fine. So normally we do go to the local boards, but I'm in mind with Councillor Hulse. Look, the thing is, if it's only going to come back that they say, no, we don't want to, then we come back here again and then we go, no. So it is a bit of a futile exercise sometimes. We've got we have a direction to dispose of things that we don't need anymore because we are making huge cuts into the budgets. We need that money. So I feel a little bit, I think it is important that they have a say. It's been a bit backward just because it's a different process and it's not AT's fault. It's just, everybody assumed they were AT car parks, they're not. And
okay,
so they've come to us. So for me, I will support those two, adding those two, but I do have my reservations about, this whole process of going to the local boards all the time and then in the end, we either say no.
Councillor Walker, are you happy to all three resolutions? John? Sir John? You're happy to second all three? Yep. Okay, right, there are no more speakers, so I'm going to put the resolution. Sorry, Councillor Sayers.
I was just, I wondered if Councillor Cooper wanted to include the Rodney local board in that consultation, because they're obviously part of that loop and they're just not mentioned in C.
No, that's part of B anyway. That will occur as part of B anyways.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't say that. That's not clear to me, Mr Chair.
That.
That's what 2D
implied.
Well, then why do you have C?
Exactly.
If you're going to have C, you need to include the Rodney local board for equality.
Because the 2D analysis has been done for Browns Bay. Okay. So
well, C, with all due respect, Mr Chair,
Greg, you've got earlier resolutions from 2 months ago that are still live as well about.
Yeah, I know, but this is a new one, Mr Chair. I don't understand.
Okay, well, put up an amendment, Councillor Sayers.
Well, I'm just asking Linda if she wants to do it.
Can I just be clarified? So in the 2D process, will the local board be consulted?
Yes.
Thank you. So it's already in there. So no, I'm not prepared to put anything extra unless Councillor Sayers wants.
Do you still want C?
So
I have not had any signal of any further amendments, so I'm going to put these
resolutions.
Oh,
well, yes, I'll put the amendment forward. Thank you for the invitation, Mr Chair. I'll put D.
That will be as a further amendment. If you've got a second to have an amendment
I'll second that.
to this.
We've got a seconder.
We just heard that it's inferred.
It's implied and included, councillor Sayers.
So is this going to tie up 2 CCOs for 2 small car parks? This is just crazy.
No, it's just getting ridiculous.
Just put it through.
Okay, I'm going to vote, I'm going to move, so we've got a seconder for D, do we?
Yeah.
Councillor Watson, okay, right, well, I'm going to do, so we'll put that up, so D is going to be done separately, and it's going to be moved by councillor Sayers, second by councillor Watson. So I'm going to put A, B and C. All those in favour?
Aye.
And D, I'm taking as part of that
Hang on.
substantial.
It's an amendment.
You didn't ask for against. I'm against. I'll have my vote.
All those against?
Yep. Record.
Record Watson and Walker? Yep.
Yes, please.
Wayne Walker, okay.
Don't
Right.
consult with the board.
You don't need to put it in there.
No.
Okay, so it's not D, but, okay, there is D, and it's not been put as an amendment, it's been put out as another motion, but moved by two.
No, I
So
wasn't against.
all those in favour of,
For which
this is D, it's moved by councillor Sayers and seconded by councillor Watson. Right, so remember, staff advice has been that it is implied in B anyway, but if you want to have this as a extra banquet,
Yeah.
so I'm going to...
Mr. Chair, sorry.
should D be Baxter
Yes.
Street,
Yes.
not Browns Bay?
Yep, got that wrong. Okay,
And you should take out hibiscus and bays out of that one as well.
right, so this is another resolution on top of B which covers it, so I'll just remind people of that. All those in favour of this?
Aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
No. I'll take the noes, have it, I'm afraid.
I'd better call for a division on that, Ross.
Too late.
Sounded that way to
Too
me.
late, the division's over. Okay, right, we're moving on to the next